HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Now what is HTTP? HTTP, it is the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, is the set of rules for transferring files such as text, images, sound, video and other multimedia files over the web. As soon as the user opens their browser, they are indirectly using HTTP. HTTP is an application protocol that runs on top of the TCP/IP suite of protocols, which forms the foundation of the internet. The latest version of HTTP is HTTP version 2, which was published in May 2015. It is an alternative to its predecessor HTTP version 1.1, but doesn't make obsolete, as the HTTP version 1 is still used. Now how HTTP works? Through the HTTP protocol, resources are exchanged between client devices and server over the internet. Client devices send requests to servers for the resources needed to load a web page. The servers send responses back to the client to fulfill the requests. Requests and responses share sub-documents such as data on images, text layouts, etc., which are pieced together by client web browser to display the full web page file. In addition to the web page files it can serve, a web server contains HTTP daemon, a program that waits for HTTP requests and handles them when they are arrived. A web browser is an HTTP client that sends requests to servers. When the browser's user enters file request by either opening a web file by typing in a URL or clicking on hypertext link, the browser builds an HTTP request and sends it to the Internet Protocol address IP indicated by the URL. The HTTP daemon in the destination server receives the request and sends back the requested file or files associated with the request. Now here is an example. So to expand on this example, a user wants to visit google.com. The user types in the web address and computer sends the GET request to a server that hosts that address. That GET request is sent using HTTP and tells the Google server that the user is looking for the HTML, Hypertext Markup Language, code used to structure and give the login page its look and feel. The text of that login page is included in the HTML response. Other parts of the page, particularly its images and videos, are requested by separate HTTP requests and responses. The more requests that are made, for example, to call a page that has numerous images, the longer it will take the server to respond to those requests and for the user system to load the page. When these request-response pairs are being sent, they use the TCP/IP to reduce and transport information in small packets of binary sequences of ones and zeros. These packets are physically sent through electric wires, fiber optic cables, and wireless networks. The requests and responses that servers and clients use to share data with each other consist of ASCII code. Requests state what information the client is seeking from the server. Responses certain code that the client browser will translate into a web page. Now, the difference between HTTP versus HTTPS. HTTPS is the use of Secure Socket Layer (SSL) or Transport Layer Security (TLS) as a sub-layer under regular HTTP application layering. HTTPS encrypts and decrypts user HTTP page requests as well as the pages that are returned by the web server. It also protects against eavesdropping and man-in-the-middle attacks. HTTPS was developed by Netscape. Migrating from HTTP to HTTPS is considered beneficial as it offers an added layer of security and trust. Now, HTTP requests and responses. Each interaction between the client and server is called a message. HTTP messages are requests and responses. Client devices submit HTTP requests to server, which reply by sending HTTP responses back to the clients. HTTP requests, this is when the client device, such as internet browser, asks the server for information needed to load the website. The request provides the server with the desired information it needs to tailor its response to client device. Each HTTP request contains encoded data with information such as the specific version of HTTP followed, the HTTP or HTTP version 2 are two versions. A URL responds to the source of the website. An HTTP method, this indicates the specific action the request expects to receive from the server and its response. HTTP request headers, This includes data such as what type of browser is being used and what data the request is seeking from the server. It can also include cookies, which show information previously sent from the server handling the request. And HTTP body, this is optional information the server needs from the request, such as the user forms, username, password logins, short responses, and file uploads that are being submitted to the website. Now let's start with the HTTP responses. So the HTTP response is the data received by the client device from the web server. And its name suggests the response is the server reply to HTTP request. The information contained in an HTTP response is tailored to the context the server received from the request. HTTP response typically include the following data: HTTP status code, which indicate the status of the request to the client device. Responses may indicate success. An informational response, a redirect or errors on the server or client side. HTTP response headers, which send information about the server and requested resources. And an HTTP body, which is optional. If a request is successful, this contains the requested data in the form of HTML code, which is translated into a web page by the client. Now we have the HTTP status codes. In response to HTTP requests, server often issue response codes indicating the request is being processed. There was an error in the request or that the request is being redirected. Common responses codes including the following. So we have the 200 OK, is that the request such as get or post worked and is being acted upon. We have the 300 or moved permanently. This response code means that the URL of the requested resource has been changed permanently. We have the 401 unauthorized. The client or the user making the request of the server hasn't been authenticated. We have the 403, the forbidden. The client's identifier is known but has not been given access authorization. We have the 404, which is not found. This is the most frequent error code. It means that the URL is not recognized or the source at the location does not exist. We have the 500 internal error, and this means that the server has encountered a situation it doesn't know how to handle. Now we have proxies in the HTTP. Proxies or proxy servers are the application layer servers, computers or other machines that go between the client device and the server. Proxies relay HTTP requests and responses between the client and the server. Typically, there are one or more proxies for each client-server interaction. Proxies may be transparent or non-transparent. And transparent proxies do not modify the client's request, but rather send it to the server in its original form. But the non-transparent proxies will modify the client's request in some capacity, and non-transparent proxy can be used also for additional services, often to increase the server's retrieval speed. Web developers can use proxies for the following purposes: caching, because the cache servers can save web pages or other internet content locally for faster content retrieval and to reduce the demand for the site bandwidth. We have authentication, controlling access privileges to applications and online information. We have logging, the storage of historical data, such as the IP addresses of clients that sent requests to the server. We have the web filtering, controlling access to the web pages that can compromise security or include inappropriate content. We have load balancing, client requests to the server can be handled by multiple servers rather than just once. Now here is an example for the HTTP request. So you can see that the type we have get and post. We are using here at the HTTP version 1. And here you can see this is the request headers, the host, the user agent, the accept language encoding. Now just have a basic idea. Now we have here the general headers, like the connection, the upgrade insecure request. And we have representation headers here as well. So here you can see the content type, the content length, and of course we have more data. This is just a simple example of HTTP request. The post method here, we have as again the get method, but for now keep that in your mind. Don't worry, we'll talk about that in detail later on. Now this is the example for the HTTP response. So here you can see that here is the response headers. So it is version 1, HTTP version 1. The status code is 200, okay. And access control allowed origin in star, connection keep align. And here you can see that this is the representation headers, by the way. Okay, and here we have the general headers, all right. Okay, now this is, and here we have the body here. So in case we are trying to download a file or whatever, etc., etc. Okay, And by the way, you can see that here we can see that the server is Apache and with a lot of options, a lot of headers, and etc. etc. Okay, now this is just a simple example of how the request, HTTP request and response working. But again, don't worry, we'll go in details about that. We will use a specific tools for forging the HTTP requests and responses, and we can understand fully about the HTTP request and response, and let's say the most important headers and options for that. Okay, thanks for watching.